I don't think that the proposed plans actually fix the problem. I think that these are attacking symptoms of the problem, and the problem is a lot bigger than that.
The problem goes deeper, and exactly, these are symptoms. You won't be able to fix an issue just by taking care of those alone.
Of course not.
Yeah.
And the core problem that I think everybody can agree upon to some degree is that there is a history of racism and racial violence and bigotry and whatnot in our country, in this empire, and that has had, I mean, to be completely fair, it's only recent in like the past half a generation, more or less, maybe almost a full generation, where like from a structural standpoint, from a legal standpoint, like those things have been more or less equality under the law on paper has been achieved for the most part. And there's a lot of points where you can contest that, sure, but slavery has been abolished. Jim Crow era is gone. Like, we had the civil rights movement that had a lot of sweeping changes that came along with it that has, compared to before that point, greatly bettered the lives of everyone, not just people of color, not just like I personally believe we have a better society when people are given equal opportunity to be of use to said society, really, and use to themselves. So like, and I think that anybody who disagrees with that is kind of dumb. I'm willing to take that strong stance.
Your opinion, man.
I know, right? That's like,
but I do agree.
Right.
On the record.
And it's like, but how do you address? Because racism at its core is a way of thinking. It's a mental framework, right?
Yeah.
And so you don't defeat racism. You don't defeat a mental framework with policy. You don't defeat a mental framework with, catchy hashtags and restructuring institutions in a society. Like you haven't done anything to address the framework. And honestly, what I personally, my personal opinion on this is that actually a lot of the ways that these changes, this rhetoric, these movements are being carried out, the way that people are talking about this, you're actually not addressing the framework. You're not damaging the framework at all. You're enforcing it.
You're making it stronger.
You're making it stronger.
By enacting policies that give government more power over the day-to-day activities of human beings in this country. They have more weapons to use against you in the future. They can use those same laws that you're enacting to basically get their way when your way doesn't suit their needs anymore.
Right.
I know that's a fairly vague overview, but the more power that a government has, the more it can exercise it over you. The less power a government has within reason,
right,
the more freedoms that you retain as an individual.
Yes.
And that's not to say that the government should have no power.
Obviously not.
There is a balance, just like anything else.
Right.
But to give away more and more of our freedoms for their power in order to, like, be like, hey, Dad, take care of, this for me. Hey, Dad, do this. Essentially, daddy government.
Or as some would like to say, Big Brother.
Do this for me. Take care of this for me. Make sure that I don't feel this emotion. Make sure that I'm not offended by this. You're just walling yourself in more and more and more into a system.
The way I've always said it is like, when you fashion a weapon, you have to be prepared for that weapon to be used against you. Like, that's what making a weapon does.
That's exactly what's going on.
Like, and I actually
government
think it's
is a tool.
Yes, and I think it's beyond government though. Like, I think it's actually more fundamental and deeper. It's a psychological thing because essentially the way that this got started, all of these problems, this bloody history that we have, that we've literally fought a civil war over, started because at some point someone looked at someone from Africa, a black person, right, and said, you are, based off of what I can visually see, the fact that you are physically manifesting with different qualities than I am, that you are separate from me in my head, like I'm putting you in a different category in my head, And I have chosen to make you lesser than me based off of that categorization. And that enables me to do all sorts of horrible things to you.
Mm-hmm.
It's also the same thing that happened from a mental framework. It's the same thing that happened with Germany in the 40s. Like, that same mental framework is what allowed them to put Jews in concentration camps. Like, that's where that comes from. When you can separate an individual or a group of individuals into a category that is not one that you sit in, and you then can make that category negative as a whole, or less than as a whole, you can you can rationalize anything at that point.
And we've seen it.
Yeah,
we've seen it throughout history.
It's constantly in history.
Mm-hmm.
And what I'm seeing right now is there is a lot of push to, and I know it's well-meaning. I'm not trying to say that it's like this horrible, terrible idea. I understand the reaction. I understand where it comes from. And honestly, like, I had similar reactions myself, over the years. Where what is happening now is, instead of going, that mental framework is wrong, and we need to get rid of that mental framework, you are now co-opting that framework, and instead you want to weaponize that framework to benefit you. You are saying, like, well, I need to be amplified because where before it was, I'm black and therefore I'm lesser than you. It is now, I am black and therefore I need to be amplified and benefited, and like, I need my own things. I need these, like, this concept of trying to make up for history reinforces the mental framework that enslaved you in the first place. Like, and the only way to actually end this saga of this cycle, rather, of racism from that perspective, like, not from an institutional perspective, but in the minds of people, because that's where I feel like this battle actually is. Like, the real battle exists in the minds of people. You have to get them to stop using the framework of their oppressors. Because if you are putting yourself, if you're internalizing that you are in a different category from someone else, you are fashioning, like, you are adopting that framework. You are taking it on. And I don't think you can ever beat this history if you're using that framework. That's my personal perspective. I think that, if you want to really come to a solution where, we have a society that is actually better and we don't just keep doing this dance, the way that we think about each other needs to change.
Mm-hmm.